I found them in my pocket. Shows me what kind of day I'm having. Harry's trying to get me to go, and my throat is not clear. So, one sec. Okay. All of that's going to show up on Facebook Live. So I will say, good evening, everybody. This is 103.5 FM, WNHH, NewHavenIndependent.org. And you are listening to the show. And I'm its host. My name is Michelle Turner. I'm going to take a swig of tea to see if I can clear whatever this is that's holding on to my vocal cords. And got a little wet because it's a little wet outside. And I ain't have my umbrella. I left it in, I think, my mom's car. So I'm without an umbrella and a raincoat because somebody took my raincoat. I'm a grown woman. Who is stealing raincoats? But anyway, I have the good fortune of having Charles Warner Jr., better known as Chaz Warner, and the lovely Kai Perry, who's also my soror. And
hey,
they
Sarah.
are, hey, Sarah, they are with the Amistad Committee of New Haven, of Connecticut, correct?
Yes.
And they've got an event coming up on Saturday, which is why they are here in the studio. The Life of William Grimes. Now, if you haven't heard of William Grimes, this is possibly one of your better opportunities to really understand who he was and what his significance is as far as his life and to the city of New Haven. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
So before we get into William Grimes,
Yes.
Kai, can you talk a little bit about the Amistad Committee and its purpose?
Okay, so the Amistad Committee was founded in 1988, and its purpose is to recognize and preserve the achievements of African Americans here in Connecticut. The original Amistad Committee was founded in 1839, and its purpose was to raise monies to aid in the legal defense for the Amistad Africans and for their return voyage back to Sierra Leone. And so Al Marder in 1988 said, what a better way to honor that history and that legacy by re-establishing the Connecticut Amistad Committee. And so since then, we do several events, talks, fundraisers, all in the name of recognizing African Americans' contributions to Connecticut.
And you all also do a scholarship. Am I correct? Or you've done one?
We have in the past.
You have in the past, correct?
We were acknowledging, I think it was the 100th anniversary, the 175th, I think, anniversary of the Amistad incident. And we had an essay contest at that time, a statewide essay contest for students throughout Connecticut to participate. And we were able to give them some book scholarships for that.
So how do you I know you said you do different events, but this keeps the legacy alive by educating people about the Amistad, correct?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I can't even say the first thing. So after building the statue, we erected the statue of Sangbei, PA in front of City Hall, which is in the exact location where the Amistad Africans were first jailed here in New Haven. We also helped to raise money to build the Freedom Schooner Amistad, which is now still back in action and sailing around Connecticut. So we do several different events, but we also support other organizations here in Connecticut, long as they're promoting the preservation, like I said, and acknowledging African Americans' contributions and current contributions as well as historic contributions. So they're both really important to us.
We had the pleasure of having Frederick Douglass here. What was it? Last summer? Was it last summer?
Yes.
Frederick Douglass was here last September. And prior or this past year.
Oh, yes.
Remember?
I was like, hold on. You trying to pull?
No,
are you pulling my leg?
I'm not having a Trump
That's
moment.
right.
I'm not having a Trump moment. Okay, let's be clear. I know what I saw. I was there. I took pictures by the
That's right. We did take pictures
memorial,
with Frederick Douglass.
and we took pictures with Frederick Douglass.
Yes, we did.
So yes, and the reason why, which was interesting to me, which I did not, I kind of pride myself on knowing New Haven history.
Yes.
And one of the things I did not know was that he actually came to New Haven to recruit soldiers to fight.
Yep.
And so we stood by the Civil War statue and took the pictures with Frederick Douglass.
And now that statue is the 29th Colored Regiment that he helped to put together. And so that's one of the Connecticut Freedom Trail sites. And the Amistad Committee is also one of the main forces behind the creation of the Connecticut Freedom Trail.
That's right.
And that was also done through legislation, which was sponsored by our current mayor and our then state senator. Tony Hart.
Yeah. And last year, it popped up on my timeline that September 10th, Connecticut Afro Outdoors.
Yes.
We sailed on the Amistad.
That's right.
Last year.
Right.
And I think I had been once before and I was familiar with the history, but it was nice to hear it in a little bit more detail. And it was nice to see that people were really interested in the history of the Amistad.
Absolutely. And the history of the Amistad is also a big push for Connecticut tourism. Connecticut has a lot of wonderful early American history and not just European American history. And so that's another thing that the Amistad Committee and the Connecticut Freedom Trail looks to do, is to serve the community through educating them about, our glorious and sometimes painful past. But it also helps us to kind of have a good view of the direction for the future.
Yeah, because I think for a lot of people, it's so funny when I go south and I tell people, I'm from New Haven, and they say, oh yeah, Yale is there. And then I say, oh, well, the statue of Cinque is also there. And they're like, Cinque? I'm like, no, that's not how you say his name, but I'm not going to mess with you. This is not about me trying to educate you, but at least you know what I'm talking about.
That's right.
And at least, I can tell you that, yes, there are Black people in New Haven. And yes, we do honor our history.
Right.
We do honor our ancestors. We do honor our history because we want to push toward the future and recognize the past and have all that come together. With that said, William Grimes.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Grimes was not born in Connecticut.
No. He was actually born in Virginia. And because, he was born enslaved, his father was the rich plantation owner on an adjoining plantation to the one that his mom worked on and the one he was born on. But he was sold somewhere around about 10 times.
Yeah.
And then he decided, after so much abuse, and a lot of his experience was physical abuse. And so he stowed away on a ship. He was hired out by his master to do ship work. And the guys that worked on the ship actually cleared a space for him in a bale of cotton. And he was able to put provisions in there and then stow away and then make his way to New York. So when he got to New York, at some point he runs into a former master.
Right.
So
that's the irony of it.
Right, exactly. And at that time, with no technology like we have today to run into your former master, man, it's so far from home, from Georgia where he left.
Right.
So he was like, this is not far north enough. So he made his way eventually to New Haven. And here he met a nice New Haven girl and married her and started
They had
a family.
18 kids?
Yeah, well, yes, 18 kids, and I guess 12 survived.
It's a pretty big family.
Yes. And so he had a nice, thriving business. He was a barber. He had a lot of clientele from Yale. But again, he was tracked down by his last master, who said, "You belong to me, and you need to pay me for you wanting to be free." So he had to buy himself out of freedom.
Yeah.
Sell his house, all his belongings, and he bought his way out of freedom. And in order to recoup those financial losses, he wrote, he copyrighted, and published his life story, his autobiography.
Oh, well, and it's interesting because I read the link, and it's a historical link, but his narrative is really, truly the first.
The first. Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't get recognition as the first.
Right.
For whatever reason.
He was a little known character, so, it's different when you have someone like a Frederick Douglass,
right,
who's like a national figure,
right,
and other people who get credit for telling their story. Not only that, though, he was also, I guess, the first for calling himself a slave in the title of his book.
Right. And written by himself.
Right.
That was the subtitle.
He really created a genre, unknowingly created a genre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because after him, there became other books. And safe to say, with someone like a Frederick Douglass, he had the abolitionists behind him. And so they probably wanted to promote the idea of how horrible slavery was to non-Africans, and
this was like an approved political message. There was a machine,
and it's marketing and branding.
Sure,
sure.
But it was William Grimes, right, was written before there even was an abolitionist movement.
Correct.
It was like 1825, and then 20 years later, I think, was
30 years
Frederick
later.
Douglass's autobiography.
Yeah. And I think with William Grimes also, I think the interesting thing to me is that he actually turned around and did it a second time.
Yeah, 30 years later.
30 years later, he went back and he added things to the book to make it, I guess, sellable, if you will.
But it's cool because, with an autobiography, like the longer you live and the more you do, there's more to tell. And that's what he did. And the funny thing is, the 30 years later is still pre-Civil War. He was so advanced. His, 1825 is so far before 1860. His update still beat emancipation.
Right. And the fact that he had the forethought to say, okay, I made a good buck the last time. It was enough to bring me back. Well, like you said, now I have experience. I have a little bit more life experience, so let me add on something. And I really believe that he got more out of it, it seems, from what I've read the second time than he did the first.
Sure.
So I was also interested in him saying that, or at least knowing who his father was.
Yes. Because
a lot of times, especially during that era, people might have said, well, maybe so-and-so is your father. But he actually knew that.
Right.
And he was, like you said, tracked from place to place to place to place to place. And one of the things that struck me about his servitude was that because he was light-skinned, there was always some real issue that he had with either the people in the house or the people in the field. But he felt like, either way, but he felt like he got less stress from being in the field. But at night in Savannah, which I thought was also interesting, he could walk the streets and people would think he was a white man.
So he used, and then he still used that for the benefit of black people. Like when he helped the free gentleman from Richmond to pass through safely by acting as his, fake
his
master.
His owner. Now, we all know, well, we don't all know, but we in this room know that he came to New Haven.
Yes.
He left New Haven, and then he came back, and he remained here for his life, correct?
Yes, he did. And died here and was buried in Grove Street in 1865. And so what amazes me is that we've all passed the cemetery at Grove Street, not knowing that this unsung hero has been laying right there. And I mean, right. So when you walk in, right next to the caretaker shed, Grimes' family obelisk is right next to the caretaker shed. Literally touching
That's amazing,
the shed.
Isn't it?
That's amazing. And I didn't think, I have to brush up on my Grove Street history, but I didn't think that blacks were allowed to be buried there.
Well, it's quite interesting because I've heard some lore about this, and so someone like a Judith Schiff, who I'll talk to soon, I'm sure will make it plain for me. What I understand is that there was a colored section that somehow was, I guess, in the back at one time, and maybe there was some work done to change the entrance, so the last are now first.
Yes.
They're now at the front of Grove Street Cemetery. So where William Grimes is buried, you also have the grandfather of W.E.B. Du Bois, Alfred Du Bois, who's there. You have Yale's first black medical school graduate, Cortland Creed. Dr. Creed is buried right there. Jehudi Ashman. A lot of local and, well-known African-Americans all right there together.
So distinct in being in Grove Street. So with him getting his barbering skills and creating the book, he really did reestablish himself here in New Haven.
Sure.
And he really did take on the life that he thought he deserved.
And one that he had watched other people have at his expense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But doesn't he just talk so much about being a poor man? That's something that in his autobiography, I guess, was striking to many folks, was that he didn't refer to himself as a Negro, but as a poor man. And didn't he still die poor?
Yes.
A poor man?
Yes.
So
he never quite reached back to the heights he had achieved. He never was able to get back to that place.
To get back to that place.
But he also talked about being happy, though. Although he didn't have certain trappings, he was content.
Yeah, because Kai, he does say, he writes in his autobiography, hoping that its sale will help remedy his dire financial situation. And he bitterly records the mistreatment he received in both the North and South. Closes biography with an unforgettable and powerful condemnation of American society as a whole. Quote, "If it were not for the stripes on my back, which were made while I was a slave, I would be taken off and made into parchment, and then bind the Constitution of glorious, happy, and free America. Let the skin of an American slave bind the charter of American liberty." So he really felt as if, and rightfully so, that he was cheated out of his life and liberty. And that nobody really came or stood up to say, this is wrong.
Right.
This is not what you need to do. This man has worked for this, and no one should be considered as property. So it's interesting to me that despite him being here, nobody still came to his defense.
But he died in August of 1865, so he was able to see that, this war had been fought to, I guess as it was billed, to free the slaves. So at least he was able to see some progress and definitely have hope for the future and his own children and their children.
Let's see. He talks about being a driver in Savannah. He talks about how he got away from one owner and he makes a half-hearted escape but runs out of food and returns to his master.
Yep.
He gets sold to his master's son, George, who sells him to his older brother. And he's so dissatisfied with his treatment by his new master that on a journey to Savannah, he tries to break his own leg.
With an axe. With
an axe. Mm-hmm. So that tells you the conditions that he worked under and how abused he was.
Mm-hmm.
But the question becomes then, how many people did this that we don't know about?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how many people really tried to get themselves out of slavery? Mm-hmm. And those stories are never told to us.
Well, at least they're not written down.
Right.
And then, you know, because so much of our history as black people in America is oral, a lot of times people will tell you, oh, that doesn't count because there's no record.
Right. Right. And it's lost.
Right.
It's lost.
Or not accepted as valid because it can't be substantiated with paperwork.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with Grimes's autobiography, it gives you a real feel from what I see. It gives you a real feel as to what he went through, how he really did try to pursue his freedom, only to get caught once again and have to go through the same thing all over again.
Right.
So I really find that his narrative is a strong one, and that, unfortunately, by him penning the first, he still didn't get the recognition that he so deserved in penning the first one. So talk a little bit about the event. What are you all doing in honor of William Grimes?
Well, the Amistad, like I said, helped to create the Connecticut Freedom Trail, and the William Grimes gravesite is going to be inducted into the Connecticut Freedom Trail as a site of its own.
Wow.
So Grove Street Cemetery is already a site, but there's so many people there, so many renowned people there, making William Grimes's gravesite its own Freedom Trail site will direct attention specifically to the story of William Grimes. And that gravesite is not only William Grimes's name on that family obelisk, it also has the name of his children and his wife and other family members who in their own right have made contributions to New Haven, to Connecticut, and other places in the United States. Local families with the last name of Lathrop. There's one of his daughters married a Civil War vet, Robert Cromwell. Those names are also on the obelisk. So
wow.
If you come for William Grimes, you can learn about other people as well.
Now, how long did it take you all to come together to make this happen? Because I know that this is a process.
It is, but actually, we have a relationship with William Grimes's 3 times great-granddaughter. So his great-great-great-granddaughter, Regina Mason, has picked up a lot of the work that William Grimes originally did. She co-edited his original work, The Life of William Grimes, The Runaway Slave, and re-released the book. She also wrote herself, she authored an afterword to that book. And so she's done a lot to keep William Grimes's name at the forefront of the community. And she's also produced a really wonderful documentary on her discovery of William Grimes as her relative, and then shows depictions of what his life was like based on his own autobiography. So she has been to town. There was an event at the New Haven Museum. She also showed the documentary in June here. So
that was part of Arts and Ideas.
Exactly. So from seeing her then, we just had this ongoing discussion about a way to really honor William Grimes the way that he should. And so this is what we came up with. And so now he will join the around 150 Connecticut landmarks that are recognized as Freedom Trail sites.
And what time is this?
11 o'clock, Sunday, September 15th, at Grove Street Cemetery.
And how does one, do they just show up? Does anybody, do you?
It is free and open to the public.
Okay. So, what do you hope that you all get from this?
Okay.
What do we hope that we get from this? We hope that we bring some recognition to an unsung hero, William Grimes. We hope we have this opportunity to share his story that he worked so hard to share, that even with all this hard work and through writing his autobiography, he still didn't get the notoriety he deserved. So this is our attempt to pay him back, and hope that some young people will get there. That's not really something I'm working on.
Is there a program for Saturday, albeit brief, or?
Yes, ma'am. There's an organized ceremony with varied speakers from the community. Mayor Harp, we have Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. Our keynote speaker for that day is the Reverend Dr. Frederick J. Streets, the senior pastor of Dixwell Congregational. And there's interesting relationship between Dixwell and William Grimes. His wife, Clarissa Caesar, joined what is now Dixwell Church in 1839.
Wow. And I thought that there was some kind of connection because there were a lot of people from the church when they showed the documentary in June. So I knew that some kind of way he was connected to that historic church.
Yes, and so what I hope to get out of this event is to show how our community, our present-day New Haven community, works together to provide quality programming and education for the community. This is a combined effort between the Amistad Committee, who sponsored William Grimes to the Freedom Trail, the Connecticut Freedom Trail, and I'm currently the president for the state, and then Dixwell Congregational Church, which is also a Freedom Trail site. Yale University is a partner, and so we're all working together to provide information and a quality experience for the New Haven community.
And Chaz, did you say that Regina Mason will be there?
Yes.
She'll be one of the speakers as well.
Okay.
She will be there
on Saturday.
And she's also bringing other family members. So it's great because the descendants of William Grimes will be with us at Grove Street to honor their great-great-great-grandfather, their 4 times great-grandfather, their 5 times great-grandfather. People are coming to not just the New Haven citizens, but his family is coming to say thank you and thank you to us.
Well, she was living in California at one time. She still is?
Yes. But she definitely makes her way around to tell the story of William Grimes.
And how long had she been working on this? Because I remember in the documentary, she, like most people do, you know, when you're looking for your ancestors, you know, everything comes in fits and starts.
Right.
She'd get far, and then it was 3 steps back, and then she gets 6 steps, and then it was 4 steps back. So she really worked on this, and she was very persistent.
But I know the reissue that she co-edited with a professor from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, that was reissued in 2008. Okay. And then she did the afterword and the documentary, and so it's been an ongoing living project.
Yeah, living and
she'll
breathing.
also be the homecoming speaker at Dixwell Church on Sunday, September 16th.
Okay.
She is here to celebrate Clarissa Caesar, her 3 times great-grandmother.
Wow. That's amazing.
By coming home.
And bringing the rest of the family with her.
Yes.
That is amazing. So, not to talk about or turn things away from William Grimes, but tell me a little bit about the Freedom Trail.
The Connecticut Freedom Trail, 150 that are significant to African American history. And that could be anything from like the civil rights movement, freedom movement, and slavery. And so small towns in Connecticut, you'd be surprised at some of these small towns that we don't think of being connected to African Americans today that have sites that have honor the history of African Americans there, but all over the state. Hartford, major cities like Hartford, and then small towns, out of the way places. Yes,
yeah, because we don't think about Connecticut being rural at one time, and people on farms.
Yes,
you had people who made horseshoes, the blacksmiths,
and all that work had to be done.
And 9 times out of 10,
doing it, right?
it was African Americans who were doing it.
And so the Freedom Trail Commission is made up of people who run different historical societies and major museums throughout the state. So like the New Haven Museum and the Wadsworth Athenaeum and the Maritime Museum and other things and other organizations throughout the state come together, churches. And so we are looking to still like record and share the history of African Americans in Connecticut.
I think one of the things, that is always interesting to me is how people take for granted their elders sitting around talking and they don't record their elders.
Yes.
And so consequently, I just had my uncle pass 2 weeks ago now. And there's a debate as to how many children were in the family. And I always thought it was a certain number. Other people are saying it's another number. And all my life, I had heard the number I had. So now it's a matter of people going back and really sitting down and counting everybody out. But nobody has taken it upon themselves to sit and really record the history. And so consequently, we got all this information all over the place, and it needs to be drawn back because my cousin's kids have kids.
Right.
And now their kids are getting older and they're on their way to college. And so soon they're going to have kids, high school graduates, people going out into the world.
Yep.
And so now you're 2 to 3 generations removed and they don't know.
Right.
There's different things they just don't know. And you try to explain to them and they're like, well, that's not what I heard. I heard this. And then, you go back to your family member and say, well, wait a minute. Why do you know that and I don't? Or why do I know this and you don't? So it's a matter of people really trying to sit down and come together. And I think one of the things that you all are probably promoting is that idea of keeping history alive.
It gives us good, strong, like you find out like a whole bunch of mentors or a whole bunch of role models from your own backyard or in your own family. And you're like, man, I have some strength here. Good shoulders to stand on. And so when I think about those people at Grove Street, who we never really think about as we drive past,
right?
There's some wonderful stories yet to be told. And what I hope to do, of course, with my partner in crime here, Kai, flush those stories out and bring those to the community because there's a lot. There are a lot of stories to be told right there, laying right next to each other, Michelle.
Oh, it's interesting too, like you said, that the last have become first, and the fact that these people are here, and things got turned around, so they cannot be ignored now.
Oh,
their history, their stories can't be right.
That's right.
Can't be ignored. So Saturday, you're having the
induction
recognition,
ceremony.
The induction, and then Sunday there's something at the church.
Yes.
And what times does that start, or is it all incorporated into your church service?
Well, the church service, Regina will be speaking at the church service, and that will be at 11 o'clock on Sunday, September 16th. So both events, both days start at 11 o'clock.
Okay. All right. And if somebody wants more information or they just want to learn more about William Grimes, what do you all suggest?
I suggest hopping into this wonderful autobiography that we've been talking about, The Life of William Grimes, the Runaway Slave. And we're lucky to be in a town that has an institution like Yale, because Yale has a copy of that rare first release of the book.
Really?
But William Grimes's descendant, Regina Mason, will be in town, and she will also be signing books Saturday.
Okay.
And Sunday as well, she will have books to sign. So if you're interested in the life of William Grimes, there'll be plenty of copies floating around New Haven this weekend, and I suggest that people pick it up. And of course, the documentary, Gina's Journey, is one that you should definitely watch.
And the book is for sale on Amazon.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is. Awesome. Yeah.
Paperback, $19.95.
Yes.
I just think it's so cool. It was, autobiography written by himself, told by himself. Nobody helped him publish it.
Right.
We're trying to figure out who even printed it.
So now check this, though, and you're raising a good point.
Mm-hmm.
He got it copyrighted. And so in him getting the book copyrighted, he expressed legally some citizenship, because in order to get a copyright, you had to be a citizen. But this was at a time when black people were not considered to be citizens.
Right.
So not only his life was a testament, it was in response to everything they said bad about black people. They weren't literate. Well, he was.
Right.
Had no business acumen, but he did. And he found out a way to legally finagle the situation and express some legal citizenship by getting the copyright.
And more than likely, the thing is, you always have to have, and you still do in a lot of ways, that one good white person who supports you, right?
Oh, I'm
right.
sure.
In order to open up doors.
But not in this case.
And that's another part of the New Haven story for black people.
Mm-hmm.
The proximity to wealthy, intelligent white people in New Haven at Yale.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people who were in service there as barbers and waiters and they're even called
caretakers,
servants and caretakers. The proximity to knowledge that they had definitely had immediate results.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in his barbering and his making small talk with those who he was doing work for, he got some good tips and made some good friends.
Yeah, they said he cut the hair of the governor
Right.
at the time.
Right.
He was a barber at the Litchfield Law School.
Right.
So
Which
he was
turned
rubbing
into
shoulders with some powerful people.
Yale's law school.
Which turned into Yale's law school.
Mm-hmm.
So he was rubbing shoulders with some pretty powerful folks.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And probably took in a couple of secrets for some
I'm
folks.
sure. I'm sure.
You know how it goes in the barbershop, right?
I need someone to tell.
Yeah, I have to have a confidant.
Yeah.
So with that, he probably said, hey, so how do I go about, because I need to.
It makes perfect sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense. So if someone wants to get more information, what do they need to do?
Well, we have a flyer with all the information. It's going all over social media. This information.
Do you all have a page? You have a
what? I've been
page.
saying I'm going to set up a Facebook page for Amistad Committee, but we have not. But you are welcome to go to my page. And I do have the event posted, Kai Perry, on Facebook. And it's been shared with all the different committee members on their pages as well.
And the Connecticut Freedom Trail has a website, and the information is also on the Connecticut Freedom Trail website. And the Freedom Trail does have a Facebook page as well. And that has information with all the associated entities with the Freedom Trail. So you can find out information about the Grimes event, but other Freedom Trail events which, relate to Black history in the state of Connecticut. And September is Connecticut Freedom Trail Month in the state of Connecticut, which is why we are also doing this event this weekend in September.
All right. And this is a family-friendly event.
Absolutely.
Yes,
So you
and we want the
bring-
young people to come out.
Yeah.
So this, unfortunately, because it's September and we realize school is just now back in session.
Right.
And so we haven't been able to get a true commitment from New Haven Public School students to be there, but it's open to the young people. So please come if you can on Saturday.
And we actually do have a group of young people, who are also coming from the New Haven Public Schools who will be participating in the induction ceremony with something nice and significant.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Do they know the history of William Grimes?
Well, they will. They definitely will. I'll tell you what they do know. They do know the importance of honoring ancestors and why it's important to care about those older folks that you're talking about, Michelle. And they will show that to the community this weekend.
That's wonderful. That's great. So again,
Saturday, September 15th at 11 a.m. at the Grove Street Cemetery.
where should people meet? Should they go to the front, the gate there?
Yes.
Or?
Yes, the gate right between Grove and Prospect Streets.
Okay.
That's where the event's going to be held, and that's where the gravesite of William Grimes is.
And we'll have a reception immediately following this ceremony.
Okay.
As well.
All right. And then Sunday?
At 217 Dixwell Avenue at the Dixwell Congregational Church at 11 a.m. for the annual church homecoming service.
How old is the church?
Say it again?
How old is the church?
The church is 198 years old right now, and 2020 will make 200 years.
Wow.
It started as the African Ecclesiastical Society, then went into Temple Street Congregational Church, and then when they moved from Temple Street to Dixwell Avenue to be closer to the black community, it became Dixwell Congregational.
Amazing. We have so much glorious history in New Haven.
We do.
It is just amazing that there's a certain pocket that is so significant, not only to us from New Haven, but just the fact that, you know, you had the Q House, which was one of the first blacks, what they called settlement houses in the country. You know, the first black Boy Scout troop.
That's right.
Founded at the Q House. Constance Baker Motley was baptized, married, and as the old folks say, funeralized at St. Luke's.
That's right.
You have the African School, which has been standing there since almost the 1700s, right there, which is now the Masons Hall.
You'd be a good commercial for the Freedom Trail because the African School / Masonic Hall is a Freedom Trail site. Varick was the last place that Booker T. Washington gave a public address. That's a Freedom Trail site. So we have a lot of historically important stuff in our black New Haven community.
In our community, indeed.
And in New Haven, period, because it's everyone's history.
It is everyone's history, and it's important that everybody know what is here and what we have and what we need to celebrate as a community.
Yes.
You know, I love parades. I don't go to the St. Patrick's Day parade anymore, but it's one of the largest in the country.
Yes.
For the Irish community.
It is.
And so there's a rich history here of a melting pot of different people and a lot to be proud of.
And we have to make sure that when we tell the story of black people in America, that we tell the complete story.
Yes.
It's not only New Haven's story with black people, it's not only violence and criminal things.
Right.
There are so many hardworking people who paved the way, not only for us because we're in New Haven,
right,
but for things in the country because, you know, we're in an area that was the beginning of America.
Right.
So a lot of the things that black people were doing here in the 1820s were predating other places in the country, period, that didn't exist at the time.
Charles Chaz Warner Jr., thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. and my wonderful Sarah Kai Perry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minty, for coming in, being here. Appreciate you both. And Dag Nabbit, go out Saturday and get yourself to Grove and Prospect and take in the induction of Mr. William Grimes as he is being added to a stop on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. Thank you so much. Oh, and I forgot to read it. Sorry, Harry, but I'm going to read it now. You're listening to the show on WNHH-LP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We're streaming live on TuneIn Radio and NewHavenIndependent.org. We're also streaming live video on Facebook Live right now. All you have to do is go to facebook.com, New Haven Independent, or just go to your own Facebook page and look us up. This has been the show on 103.5 FM, WNHH, NewHavenIndependent.org. Thank you, Harry. We're done.
All right.
It's always a good time. You're so knowledgeable yourself.
Yes, she is.
Thank you.
Yeah, it does make it easy.
Well, you know, the thing is, I mean, I like for it to be a free-flowing conversation. I just didn't get to read as much as I wanted to.
No,
because it's been crazy.